Welcome to the Restoration Activation Project video commentary series. Hi, Marianne here, and I'm glad you're with me, and it's good to be back. It's been a little while. I've been working on a couple of big projects, and I'll be sharing more about that in upcoming commentaries. But let's dive right into today's topic, perspectives. Perspectives basically hold sway. The perspectives that we function through in our day-to-day lives basically hold sway over everything we do. They determine the way we're co-creating. They determine the thoughts that we attract, the way we feel, the way we interact with others, the way we interact, and the relationship we have with ourselves. Perspectives are critical, and they're particularly important for those of us on the path of self-mastery attainment. And perspectives determine the way we perceive things. This is what makes them so critical. The way we interpret the things that go on around us, the things that happen to us. Reality as a whole. Every life situation. And as I said, the way we interact with others. The way we perceive these interactions. The kinds of experiences that we have. Perspective lords over all of that, determines that, dictates that. So you can see why the perspectives that you're operating through are vital. It's vital that you determine, first and foremost, what perspectives that you are functioning through. And shifting, when we shift our perspectives, this is how change begins to manifest. So, how do we go about shifting perspective? Well, this ties back into level of awareness. And right now, aggregate humanity consciousness and let's just keep it at that. The aggregate of human consciousness is functioning through third density perspectives. Lower vibrational perspectives of all that we see and experience, which means lower vibration perceptions of all that's going on around us. Perspectives can either raise vibratory level or decrease our overall vibratory level. Now, where do they come from? What perspectives do we have? As I said, the aggregate human consciousness perspective right now is third density, from which our third dimension unfolds, our spatial reality. And that's our level of awareness, our perspective of this reality, ourselves, the way things work. And it's at a lower vibration, an aggregate lower vibratory emanation right now. So this is why what's going on around us is going on around us, and we perceive it the way we do. All right. And this is where higher order knowledge comes into play, and it's so important, and it's such an integral part of the self-mastery process, to be continually expanding our levels of awareness of higher order knowledge of objective truth. And let's talk about that for a minute. What we are seeking, those of us that are seeking, not everybody is seeking. Always keep that in mind. Not everybody is here on the path that we're on. Even though our paths are different, we each have our unique paths. We are not on the same general path as many others. So this is just for those of us on this journey. The level of awareness that we seek to continually expand is level of awareness, increasing levels of awareness and understanding of knowledge of objective truth, higher order objective truths. And what do I mean by that? State it again. Higher order objective truths are those which are on the causal, the source causal plane. Now, most people understand cause and effect from the Newtonian science level perspective. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Newton's third law of motion. One thing occurs, another thing occurs in response. Well, and that's not true. But it is that particular law of motion was derived from a third density perspective in terms of material interactions or even energetic interactions, higher vibration energies that can't be seen, they're not observable, but material interaction, the interaction between physical energies, even unobservable energies such as electromagnetic energy, ultraviolet, infrared. Those are still physical, material expressions of consciousness. In contrast to unexpressed consciousness comprising vital energy. Okay? Expressed versus unexpressed. So, Newtonian physics is the way most people view cause and effect. Well, what I'm speaking of is what I just touched on. Source level cause. For example, the ongoing balancing process, this intelligent process wherein consciousness continually seeks to balance itself between its regressive and progressive qualities at the very basic level. This is always going on. And this unfolds through expressed consciousness. Because unexpressed consciousness is in perfect balance between its regressive and progressive qualities. But as it becomes manifest through its infinite expressions, you, me, the sky, reality, all of these different realms of existence, all different beings and entities, all forms of life. Each expression is a unique admixture of regressive and progressive qualities of consciousness. Therefore, this process is ongoing. And this process occurs within and through and between all expressions of consciousness. always going on in many ways that we can see and many more that we can't. But consciousness works from totality. Okay? Now, that is higher order objective truth. That is a different perspective, much higher order perspective than Newtonian physics. Newtonian physics, for example, I'm not just harping on that, but it just came to mind, so let's work with that. That is more an effect, and it also pertains to the principle of correspondence. Newtonian physics, third law of motion, is a reflection, a manifest reflection of the totality of consciousness and this ongoing balancing process. It is a manifest reflection of this greater, higher order process that's always unfolding. It's a third dimensional reflection. Macrocosm, microcosm. So, as a sincere seeker and one who is on the path of self-mastery, if we are sincere in seeking self-transformation for the purpose of ascension, working with this evolution cycle's unfoldment into its next, consciousness evolution cycle that we're now in is unfolding into the next, for purposes of higher order creation through which our reality will transform, then it's vital that we get a handle on our perspectives and continually seek to operate through, in this reality, in our daily lives, from higher order perspectives, from the causal plane. It has been so deeply instilled within humanity that we can effect change from the plane of effects. That we can just move things around and rearrange and change will occur. Well, yes, some changes do occur because that's energy. Energy responding to energy. But it cannot and will never equate to meaningful change. In other words, changing, truly transforming our lives and this reality into a more progressive dominant reality. By way of progressive dominant creation, which unfolds from higher order perspectives. The source causal plane is the only plane from which we can affect transformation. Just look around. Look at reality. Think about all of the different uprisings throughout history, both on the 3D level and in other dimensions. Significant change, transformation does not occur from the plane of effects. How many wonderful people have been, with the best of intentions, have set out to effect change, whether through wars. Think about that for a minute. And the devastation of war to effect change. And that's not to say that sometimes force isn't a necessary component of true upheaval and true change. But if those actions aren't unfolding from higher order understandings, then the results of those kinds of interactions are not going to transform anything. They might shake up things for a while. For example, when various governments and so forth have been overthrown during the course of the history that we've been told about, significant change is never the result. Even if things get, quote, better for a while, they continue to keep backsliding. They get back to the way they were. Let's say a new leader of a country takes office. How many times in how many different countries, I don't want to get into specifics here, where everyone had their hopes set on a new individual being in power. Well, it didn't work because the fundamental underlying paradigms through which the new leader was operating didn't change. The paradigms, the operating perspectives did not change. Yes, some subtle changes may have been made within, let's say, the government system of that particular country, but the fundamental paradigm of government was still in place. So, now let's talk about higher order knowledge. Higher order knowledge of the totality, excuse me, of objective truth. Well, I've said this before. No one being, no matter how high density perspective, no matter how advanced the being might be, no one being, no one expression of consciousness can ever hold or understand the totality of objective truth. So, from that understanding, misunderstandings, whether put out there intentionally or not, have unfolded from that. Things like solipsism, the belief that truth can't be known or that truth doesn't really exist. Well, that's not true. Objective truth is, always was, always will be. The understanding that perception is reality, well, our perceptions do impact our creations directly. The way we perceive things, which unfolds from our perspective of things, directly impacts reality. But to say perception is reality, there's just enough distortion in that to mess with people. What is really the case is that yes, relative, you could call it relative realities do unfold. Subjective truth, subjective perceptions of truth are a part of our reality. Because we can't hold the whole of objective truth, the knowledge of that. However, it is up to you and me to continually seek. That's why they call us seekers. It's an ongoing process. It's not like we gain knowledge of higher order objective truth and then rest on our laurels. Now, yes, with each new understanding that comes to us, let's take, for example, right now, your highest order understandings of the totality of objective truth. This provides the context through which we create, assuming we're working through those perspectives, those understandings, because even that doesn't do us any good in terms of either personal transformation or transformation of reality if we're not using them and applying them in our daily situations. But let's assume that you are. So that is the context, the perspectives from which we operate, which influence our perceptions, which determine the way we co-create. The way we perceive things is the context through which we create. And the best way to view our continual seeking and the progress of continually attaining higher understandings and a greater picture, a bigger picture perspective of the totality of objective truth, is you could compare it to the aperture on a camera that's constantly opening. Let me give you a couple of things that might help you really embody that concept. We've all seen those fun little photographs, those brain teasers that are photographs, really close-up photographs of different objects or settings. And it can be really challenging sometimes to figure out what we're really looking at, because it is so focused, so very, very much tunnel vision, that we really can't even get a handle on it sometimes. Another way to look at this is, and I've used this before, but I'm going to use it again because it really does bring the point more into understanding. And this is the parable of the 6 blind men and the elephant. A lot of different cultures have their version of this story, but it originated in ancient Indian cultures. Basically, 6 blind men who had no awareness of elephant in their consciousness, and they come across an elephant, and each of them happens to be positioned in different places around the elephant. One of the blind men grabs the tail, is touching it, trying to get a sense of it, trying to perceive what this thing is, and he determines that because of the tattered end on the tattered flesh on the end of the tail, that this must be a rope. Another blind man is positioned by one of the elephant's legs, and after he does his thing, he perceives that the elephant must be a great tree trunk. The next blind man is standing beside the elephant's torso. He reaches up and determines that the elephant is a great wall. The next blind man grabs one of the ears and he thinks it's a great fan, this massive, big fan. The next blind man is positioned by one of the tusks, and he determines that the elephant is a type of spear. And the sixth blind man is positioned by the trunk, the elephant's trunk, and he perceives that it is a huge serpent. Okay, so how do we use this to grasp a deeper understanding about the totality of objective truth? Well, if we view the elephant as the totality of higher order objective truth, then what each of the blind men determined from their perspectives, their perceptions, therefore, they were right. But from the bigger perspective, they were all wrong, each and every one of them. And this is what happens. This is the way things happen for you and me. As we continually, as higher order standings continue to come to us, we go from seeing the elephant as a tree trunk to seeing it more and more in its entirety, which in turn changes the way we perceive the elephant. Because we would perceive elephant and respond differently to elephant, more than likely, than we would a tree trunk. It changes everything. In some versions of the parable, the blind men actually get into blows with one another. They're so adamant about their perceptions that they come to blows with each other, saying, no, you're wrong, you're wrong. This is what it is, you're wrong. Well, that's a pretty telling situation too. It is up to us to understand this. It's core that we understand that everyone has their own unique interpretation of higher order objective truth. Even those of us that are on a conscious path of seeking self-mastery. And it's vital that we not shut each other off and shut each other down. We can learn from each other. To judge and to say another is completely wrong without investigation, to come into it emotionally, psychologically invested from a place of judging another's interpretation, is regressive creation. That is not progressive creation. And that will hold you back. It keeps your progress limited. This is one of the reasons why, one of the key reasons why I'm at the place on my journey where I don't work from any, or as minimally as possible, other set perspectives of things, whether that be scientific, spiritual, philosophical, psychological, neurological, historical. I don't work from any single perspective because that's an attachment. That limits me in the same way that the blind men were limited in their capacity to see the whole of elephant. And to argue or to ridicule or to put down others based on their perceptions of higher order objective truth is self-defeating. Use what's being put out there. Be open to it. You don't have to take it in as your own, but consider it. You might just learn something, even if it's radically different from your perspective, from your perceptions. Because to hold on to whatever, even if you believe you really have pretty high understanding for this reality, for this density of higher order objective truths, honey, you got a long way to go. We all do. And I can't tell you how many times when I've come across information that just really threw me for a loop internally in terms of, wow, this is so radically different. Oh my goodness, how can I? Oh, ooh, ah. I did not reject it out of hand. Now, I may have needed some time before I could come back to it, but the very fact that I did have all this stuff going on around it is exactly why I came back to it. That's how I knew I needed to come back to that information and to consider it carefully from a place of deep inner knowings, as well as investigation. Because there was something there that I needed to understand, and that maybe I came across it a little sooner than I was quite ready, but I never have regretted going back to or just taking it on in the moment from the witness perspective, non-emotionally or psychologically invested in the information, and just observe it and consider it. Put it down, but I'm observing it and considering it with the intention that if there's something there for me to take from this, some higher order understanding that I need, that it will come to me. So I view the information, do my whatever research is appropriate, check in with my own higher order understandings, a little contrast and compare without judgment that would limit me. In judging the other, that limits me. Knowing that higher order tidbits will come to me because that's the intention I have behind it. That's the way I approach all information. I maintain an open, and I learned this a long time ago, and it's made all the difference, a very open orientation when it comes to information. When I think about where I am now and what I would have considered 30 years ago, it's like night and day. 30 years ago, I would have thought, I'm crazy. The today me. Completely. So, we are not here to judge others, but to learn from them. Not to make ourselves feel good and say, well, I know more than they do. And you might. You might have. You may well have higher order understandings on a particular topic or an area of various unfoldments in our reality. You may well. But to judge and discard out of hand and to ridicule, that's self-defeating. Not to mention regressive creation that has an impact on everyone and everything else. It's regressive creation. It's a regressive response. The plane of causality. Ever ever increasing, more expanded levels of awareness. And this is ongoing. From one lifetime to the next, one version of ourselves to the next. This is part of the deal, people. We're not here to, quote, get there. We're here to continually seek. Continuous seeking. That's the way it works. To obtain higher order, to come to grasp various higher order truths, is meaningless if we're not applying them, shifting our perspectives so that we, in turn, our perceptions transform, which transforms what we're co-creating. So here's basically the way it works, okay? We take whatever our highest order understandings and adjust our perspectives accordingly, okay? For example, the way, beginning with our perspectives of ourselves. If you're operating from the perspective that you are merely flesh and bone, got a brain, okay, you understand mind to an extent, and conscious, and a little bit of energy centers, but if you're not coming from the perspective that there is so much, first of all, that you're an energetic being, a being sourced in pure potential and vital energy at the source level, unlimited potential, because we're each holographic expressions. Every expression of consciousness, reality is both fractal and holographic. We are not just separate pieces of the whole. We are that. Interconnected, interdependent, unique expressions of the whole of unexpressed consciousness, okay? But we are also holographic subsets of the whole of consciousness. We are self-contained, so to speak. And when we operate from our best understanding of that, our best understanding of how reality really unfolds, in other words, from the whole of consciousness balancing itself between its regressive and progressive qualities through, within, and between all of its expressions, that's what's going on from one moment to the next. That's a pretty rock solid framework, higher order perspective from which to co-create. When that is embodied within you, your perceptions change, which means the way you respond to, the way you see, relate to yourself, which dictates the way that you relate to others, the way you respond to situations and occurrences and events in your life, because you're perceiving them differently. For example, perhaps there's another awful violent act somewhere in the world. You're aware of that. But instead of looking at it from the perspective of, oh, those are the bad guys, or they're evil, wicked, or they're going after the good guys, or they're all a bunch of jerks, whatever your third density dimension perspective is, that's a limitation. That's regressive. Results in regressive co-creation because your responses are regressive, because you're viewing it from that perspective. What if you saw that same event, if you were viewing it from the perspective of the balancing process in terms of regressive and progressive consciousness, instead of good and evil, which in itself is a judgment. Judgment. Regressive and progressive. This is why I use those terms, because to say good and evil, good and bad, right and wrong, those are terms of judgment. Now, before you go crazy on that, that is not the same as saying that, oh, this is just the way it works, so I don't need to do anything. It's not my business. What's ever going on between those individuals is between them. It doesn't affect me. That's at the other end of the spectrum of seeing it just in 3D terms and judging and condemning, as opposed to the opposite end of that spectrum, which is, oh, this is all the way it's supposed to be. It's all okay because this is just the way it works. They're both regressive consciousness. Both perspectives are regressive dominant. This ties into the people that say, okay, because this is the way it works, there's nothing for me to do. This doesn't call for any involvement from me. That's a deep distortion, a deep misunderstanding, a false belief, distortion in their mind-body complex, which regresses their consciousness. They believe, another distortion, beliefs, that they're this wonderful person, this spiritual person, that's seeing things from the perspective of the whole, the one, and that they're really a progressive individual. And this is not about judging or condemning them. It's about understanding that our perspectives determine our perceptions, which in turn determine the way we create. It's about understanding that. It doesn't take us out of the equation. It doesn't take us out of responsibility. What both, if they were on journeys of self-mastery, the two of them, one end of the spectrum, the one at the other end of the spectrum, the higher order perspective is how, because an understanding the principles of creation, another thing that we all must embody, those of us on this journey, the principle of correspondence, as above, so below, as below, so above, as within, so without, as without, so within. The principle of correspondence. What's going on in me that's being reflected in this incident in the middle of another country? Because there is a direct correlation. If an event is in your awareness, there's a correlation. And so this is the cop out. A lot of people used to say, well, I'm just not going to be aware of anything. I'm just not going to look at any information. That way I'm not creating negatively. I'm not a part of it, and so on and so on. Well, no, that doesn't mean that you're out of the equation. In fact, you're regressing your consciousness further and further by hiding from, avoiding information out of fear. Fear of creating regressively is regressive creation. Sorry, but that's what it is. To create from a place of avoidance as opposed to openness and the courage to see what's unfolding, that's a completely different thing. Avoidance out of fear is regressive creation. Now, that's not to say that those of us who are, some people on this journey have been so caught up in various rabbit holes of investigating all of these occurrences from a 3D perspective, 3DD, that sometimes it's important to just shut down for a while, to detach from all of that, to pull oneself out of rabbit holes so that you can go back in a different way from a new perspective of knowledge acquisition. That's a different reason. That's not avoidance out of fear. That is what is termed as strategic enclosure. And I'll discuss that another time. But sometimes we need to take steps to keep progressing. But it must be done from a place that's not fear-based, or it ends up being regressive creation. That cycle. We're still stuck in the cycle. If we're detaching from anything, and detachment is very critical part of self-mastery. But if we're doing that out of fear, then that's regressive creation. Beginning with the perspective that we have of ourselves, what we really are, what this mind-body complex really is, and its true purpose. Beginning there. Because the way that the perspective that we have of ourselves and begin perceiving ourselves as energy beings, potential vital energy, beings of energy, enables higher understandings and levels of awareness to come our way. So basically the way it works, we take the highest level understandings of source cause of unfoldments. What's going on around us, what's going on within us, what's going on between ourselves and others, the various situations and circumstances in our lives. When our perspective begins with higher order understanding of what we are, and we work with that, we come to deeper and deeper understandings of that by working with that and from that perspective. Then our perceptions change when we start viewing ourselves from the truth of what we are. Energy beings. We're thinking about that in every moment. We're embodying that. Then we start to perceive all of our interactions, everything that we're doing, thinking, saying, creating. We start viewing from the perspective of energy. The fact that we comprise 3 major energy centers, that our thoughts, emotions, and actions are all energetic. And all energy has vibrational signatures. We start approaching everything from that. Then our perceptions change. We become more in tune with the fact that we are energy systems and responding in that way. That's wisdom. Wisdom manifest to operate through our highest level understandings of the totality of objective truth. In other words, from the source causal plane. That's how transformation begins unfolding. Higher order creation, higher vibrational energies emanating from us, which means higher order creations unfold through us. When we begin working consciously, clearing the energies, detecting the distortions that we carry, the beliefs, the concepts, our attachments to particular understandings. When we start clearing that, we're making room literally for unconditioned consciousness, unconditioned, more and more unconditioned awareness to flow through us so that we can create from a higher and higher and higher level of awareness. So we create our current levels of awareness. When we incorporate that, when that is our perspective, we begin perceiving things from that perspective. We work with that with the intention, with the understanding, first of all, that we don't know it all, that this is a journey of discovery, of ever continually seeking higher levels of awareness of the totality of objective truth. A journey that never ends, because we're never going to, quote, get there unless or until this individuated consciousness progresses either so far through all its versions and all its lifetimes and all the different realities, or regresses so far, both to the point of no return, that we dissolve back into infinite source. It's ongoing. So we're operating, we're living our lives from the framework of our current highest order understandings of objective truth. Things keep coming and coming and coming. If we're doing the self-mastery work and clearing, sometimes the rate at which things come is breathtaking. It's exciting. Things just keep unfolding. But they don't come to us when we hold on to whatever understandings, our current framework of operation. We work through that knowing that this isn't it. But we're doing the best we can with the intention, the focused intention of increasing our levels of awareness. I mean, this happens a lot to me. It's really hard to do this work, to share it with others when stuff is constantly coming. Trying to keep up with that. First of all, the process. Oftentimes for me, they're impressions. And I get a sense of it. Sometimes, and then my interpretations, translations, unfold sort of gradually. Other times it's boom, instant in the moment. Now, most of the time, These are bits and pieces of knowledge that deepen my current understandings, or add a new angle, give me a new perspective, so that I'm able to perceive differently of something that I've come to understand. But I also can't tell you how many times that as I've come to different levels of awareness, a lot of what I was working through is like blown out of the water completely, or almost completely. And you feel as though you're starting all over. That's part of the process too. Getting into the flow of change. Everything's changing. Every aspect and every expression of consciousness, by its very nature, is constantly in a state of flux anyway. When we understand that, it's not about bracing for it, but knowing that affords a level of peace. It's like, okay, got to make some more adjustments, because as we come to these different levels of understandings, it's not about beating ourselves up. It's about making course adjustments. Keeping us in line to the best of our ability with our overarching purpose of creating through progressive dominant consciousness, while our unique purpose unfolds through that. The unique ways in which we are doing that. But it's ongoing. And I've said this before, if you're referring to an individual or two, or a group of individuals that you seek information from, you found some good sources, just be aware that if some of their perspectives, therefore their perceptions, haven't shifted much over the course of a long time, then you have to question whether or not they're really doing the work themselves. They might be great as a source of information. Again, it's not about judging these individuals, but paying attention to your investments of time, focused attention, and even money. That's another currency. That's one of our currencies. Time, focused attention, and even energy. As those of us on a journey of self-mastery need to be aware of those things, how we're spending our currencies. Where and how much time are we actually spending on doing the work, putting what we know into play? Which brings in the notion of self-awareness, present moment, focus, mindfulness, baseline practices of those on a journey of self-mastery. Awareness. Awareness. That's the name of the game. Awareness, and increasing our levels thereof on an ongoing basis. And as new stuff comes to us, we make course adjustments. And sometimes it takes a little bit to get into the new flow. Takes some self-discipline. Sometimes it's chaotic. The energies can be challenging. But when we start viewing everything that's going on, because this is another higher order objective truth, I don't subscribe to the notion that some people have referred to our reality as, or our planet as, the Earth School. I don't necessarily, I don't go with that, but I do know that everything that unfolds is unfolding within us, through us, around us, is an opportunity to increase our levels of awareness. Thus, to keep growing and expanding our consciousness, our level of awareness. Everything. When you take that in alone, things are constantly changing, everything that happens to you and around you, and around the globe, and in interdimensional levels, whatever, they're all opportunities to attain higher levels of awareness. This is how we progress. Consciousness is growth oriented. Despite its regressive qualities, because progressive consciousness, and I'll put a link below this video that will direct you to an article I wrote a little while back that really gets into contrasting the differences between regressive and progressive consciousness and creation. Regressive creation replenishes itself by feeding on the energies and consciousness and creations and energetic output of other. Progressive consciousness is self-replenishing. Progressive consciousness is transcendent consciousness. It understands that both qualities, regressive and progressive, are fundamental to existence and creation. Existence would not be possible without both qualities, any more than creation is possible without masculine and feminine modes of creation. Those are the other two. Those are the two fundamental aspects. If regressive and progressive consciousness are the two fundamental qualities of consciousness, unexpressed consciousness, masculine and feminine, the gender principle, that's another principle of creation, the principle of gender, study those. Creation, existence would not unfold. We need both modes of creation. That's how I refer to masculine and feminine. And they are inherent in unique admixtures, just like progressive and regressive qualities within each of us, within each expression of consciousness. A unique admixture of both qualities. There's also a unique admixture, as we come into this plane, of both modes of creation, the two different aspects, masculine and feminine aspects of consciousness. And our particular admixture depends on a variety of different things. I won't get into that now, but what I will tell you is that in the next commentary, I'm going to get into the principles of creation and how to begin adopting them into your perspective so that your perceptions began changing. And I'm going to do that in a particular way, and you'll see in the next commentary, but this topic is so big. There's so many things that need to be said. Another day, another commentary. But on that note, I think I'm going to call it a wrap for this. But perspective. Perspective, perspective. Perspective. The way that we view ourselves determines the way we relate to ourselves, and therefore the way that we view others and relate to them. The way we see ourselves in relation to reality as a whole is driven by perspective, because perspective determines perception. And when our perspectives are grounded in our highest level of awareness of and understandings of higher order truths, then transformation of self and reality unfold. Embody that. If you found this commentary helpful, and you haven't already subscribed, I hope you will, either on YouTube or on my website, which will give you access or to notifications of when whatever I'm publishing goes online, and that you'll share this with your fellow travelers, others on this journey, or that you suspect might be on the journey. Be wise in your choices. But in any case, I hope this was a benefit. Until next time, keep on your journey. Stay true. If you need any help, you know where to find me. Been around the block a few 100,000 times. There are plenty of things that I can help you with, far more than I could ever address in these videos, on a one-to-one basis, because that's the way in which I can attune to you, specifically, your uniqueness. What I can provide in these commentaries is at a general baseline level, and there's lots of helpful information. But if you're serious and you need help on your journey, I'm here to help you find your own uniqueness and to start tapping into that and to get in the flow of your own unique self-mastery journey. It's not about you taking my journey. It's about tapping into your uniqueness and your unique path. I'm here for you. So take care until next time. Stay true to you. And I wish you all the best. Look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.